contribution, inspiring conversations with me, Kezia Luckett, and I am absolutely thrilled. I can't tell you how excited I am to welcome our guest today, Unstoppable Tracy, all the way from Canada. Now, before I introduce you and you say hello, Tracy, I'm just going to tell our listeners and watchers exactly who you are and the phenomenal things that you do. So you have been the lady who's been instrumental in literally busting Uber into Canada. You have climbed the Himalayas, you have done scuba diving and downhill skiing, you've supported airlines in mergers and strikes, you've kind of, fought for pharmaceutical government reforms. Well, there are so many things that I can say. You're an inspirational world-class speaker, and we could go on and on and on. And on top of that, you're a four-way amputee, and I just am blown away. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh my God, thank you for having me. I'm so blessed to be part of your world. You make such a massive difference, creating and paying it forward for others and driving all of us women into the best version of ourselves thanks to you. It's magical to be with you today.
Well, I'm going to tell our listeners and watchers exactly how I got in touch with you, because I was sat watching, like many of us do at home, I was watching a Facebook post, I think it was Goldcast, and it was a story that I'm going to touch upon, and you can obviously carry on with, about you when you were younger and going off to school. And the thing that touched me more than anything and made me reach out to you was because, well, two things really. Firstly was this unbelievable young woman and woman that was stood before me speaking about this situation, but also the passion from your mother to send you out to the world with this unstoppable belief that there was nothing, absolutely nothing that you couldn't do. So can you just touch upon what that story was all about?
Absolutely. And you started about my mom launching me into the world. And for some context for our listeners is, I was a child in the 70s, and in Canada and in many places around the world, even still, but in Canada and UK and Italy and wherever you are in the world, that means segregation. And it actually also means a lot of kids were given up for adoption. If you're born with a disability, the doctors even advise you, because we didn't have ultrasound. So this child is born that you're not expecting. And we describe four-way amputee. So that just means all four of my limbs. So both of my legs are missing above my knees, and my left arm's missing above my elbow. And on my right side, I have a kind of an arm extension, but it's not typical, and one finger. So no hands and no legs above knees. And so I've got this British Liverpudlian mother who was like right after the war, and they are like no nonsense, right? At 5 years old, you're making your bed and you're doing your chores. And if the school wrote home and said, you've got to be able to tie your shoelaces and go to the bathroom by yourself, you show up at school ready to tie your shoelaces and go to the bathroom by yourself. And we were walking to school that day, and the principal saw my mom and I, and he stopped us. And he said, I'm sorry, Tracy can't go to this school. And I've been told all summer that I get to go to school, and I'm super excited. And I just said it to you. And I don't know about you ladies, but when you have those memories where every time you think of it, your stomach just goes, I just felt that. I said it to you, and I could picture him because it's so real for me. And my stomach was like immediately in a knot, even all these years later. And so I expected my mom to be all mama bear. Oh, like, I bet some of you listeners are like, what? You're not going to let Tracy go to school? What? And so, but she wasn't. She just asked a question. She just said, oh, how come? And so that in itself surprised me, that she was so non-defensive, very friendly. How come? He said, well, the kids have got to be able to tie their shoelaces. They've got to be able to go to the bathroom by themselves. And You know, Tracy is a 4-limb amputee. You know, she's missing her arms and legs. And there's one teacher and there's 30 children, and there's no support. There's no educational assistance. There's no other person to help this one teacher with 30 kids. So you can understand it'd be very hard for her to be alone with Tracy and her disability and all these 30 kids. And I kind of actually get it. I'm a teacher too. I couldn't imagine being alone with 30 kids and this child who's got a fairly significant disability upon appearance. So he's not a bad man.
No.
But he couldn't, his hands were tied, right? He had no help. And so what my mom did is she counter offered, and she says, how about you try Tracy just for 1 week? And if it doesn't work out, no problem. I understand there are schools more suited for Tracy with support. But can we just try for a week? We're here now, and I know it's going to be a struggle. And if it doesn't work, you know, no accountability to the school. No problem. And so that, the principal was like, okay, she clearly is not going to leave me stuck with this child, right? And that was his big concern, was what do I do? You're not going to be able to manage her. And the mom's going to want to stay because she's in. So mom took care of that. And she got on her knees and surprised me again. And we're like outside the school, and my mom is on her knees, right? And she gets on her knees and she holds my arms, you know, embracing still wriggly worm, unstoppable Tracy at 5 years old. And she's like, Tracy, holding me still, looking me in my eye, on her knees, eyes to eyes. And she said, it's really important that you and everybody's included. Nobody left behind, including you, Tracy. I'm 5 years old. I have no idea why my mom was so intense, right? I'm like, I just want to go play, okay? Let me go, right? And I'm kind of like, okay, mom, okay. And I run up inside. Well, the principal, like, heard this whole focused lesson from my mom. And his heart's like, oh my gosh, I have to make sure this girl stays. How do I kick her out on Friday, right?
Yeah.
So fast forward to recess, and he runs outside to see if I made it, because he knows if I make it outside for recess with my shoelaces tied and all ready, that I could stay. It means I'm independent enough that I could stay. I'm not outside. And then he gets this light bulb. Like, it's her first day, right? She just needs 5 minutes. It's her first time without her mom. Give her a little bit of time. So she's late. So he waits 5 minutes. He can't see me. He goes over to another part of the playground. 10 minutes later, he can't see me. He walks all around the farthest corner. 15 minutes go by. And of course, the recess bell, the bell to come in, goes off. He never made it outside. So he is devastated. And so he runs inside to find out from the teacher, how come? Why didn't I make it outside, right? What was the obstacle? And he's like, hello, how come Tracy wasn't outside at recess? Couldn't she tie her shoelaces? Meaning me with no hands. And the teacher looks at him all confused. He's like, actually, Tracy's the first one with her shoelaces tied. Why do you ask? Like, well, how come she wasn't outside? And she's like, oh, because her little friend couldn't tie her shoelaces. So Tracy gave her a hand. It turns out none of the 30 other children in my class could tie their shoelaces. And do you remember what my mom said?
No one left behind.
Yeah. And so I would be in big trouble from my Liverpudlian strict mother if I didn't tie everybody's shoelaces in my understanding, right? I didn't understand mom meant you get your butt outside so you can stay, right? But I took it to mean I had to take care of everybody. And so by the time I tied 30 shoelaces, the Reese's bell had gone off. But you know, what's so true for all of us as women, like how often do we underestimate? Like it made sense. How does one teacher take care of me? And it made sense why I didn't belong in that room. Not because you didn't want me to be there, but because there's only so much one human being can do in our minds, right? And the reality is we can do anything we set our mind to. And the reality was I didn't want to be a shoelace leader. I had no idea that I would be a valuable contributor, right? I didn't know that I could do something that meant something to other children. All I wanted to do was be in that kindergarten classroom playing with my friends. I didn't intend on being a shoelace leader. And so how come the only girl with no hands was the only girl required to be able to tie her shoelaces? And so you bring this into women in business, we feel like, well, it makes sense because it is a bit of a man's world. Or it makes sense because they do have their MBA, they have their master's in such and such. Or it makes sense because they've got 30 years and they're like 90 years old that they are the CEO, right? Or I'm exaggerating. But we feel like there's an accurate standard operating procedure. Like in the airlines, there was an operating procedure that it was only men because of height. Well, you don't need a man to fly an airplane, and we know now that's silly, but there was a standard operating procedure that made that a rule, made it a thing. And same with me with tying my shoelaces, but that wasn't relevant. And so, you know, you in your wonderful education and coaching and inspiration and your podcast and your YouTube, you say, today is our day. And you're like, now is the time for women, and women are thriving. You taught me that, and many of us that. And so you say, now's the time. And so now's the time to bust those next barriers, right? There's no reason that I shouldn't be in that classroom. And there's no reason that you shouldn't be approaching that sponsor to fund your entrepreneurial business idea, or to make you a CEO or a VP or a director. Or there's no reason why your journey about being a mom, or about being an entrepreneur, or about inventing an idea, or about having teenagers, like all of these things are huge transferable skills, right? At 5 years old, I was ready to go to General Motors and speak to 12 vice presidents, because I was in a dentist office and I was running around and doing my thing, and he shared my dentist, and he says to my mom, I want her to come speak to my VPs. And my mom looks at him and says, you know, she's like 5, right? And he's like, I know. Actually, I lie. I think I was more like 7, but I was still a little girl, right? And he said, yeah, but she's just so unstoppable, right? She gets it. And then my mom told him this story, and she's like, Tracy just makes no, N-O, mean K-N-O-W, no as in understanding. No in English has another no, K-N-O-W, understanding. And so when I hear that principal was told no, and my 5-year-old brain made that mean, oh, no just means they don't know, K-N-O-W. And it just means you ask questions in a friendly way until you understand together, and you give it a go. How do you know unless you try? Well, this is true in business, right? When a sponsor says no to you, or a sale says no to you, or a person who you're coaching really has a massive potential and they say no, right? It just means they don't know. So how lucky am I that I got to learn so young that no just means they don't know yet. So you need to ask more questions and understand what's their filter. What is what is their way of listening? What are they hearing right now? So that mom didn't convince them to, she can tie her shoelaces, she can go to the bathroom. That wasn't his listening. That wasn't what he was filtering. His filter in that moment was, I'm going to be stuck with her and we're not going to be able to help her. And then my teacher is going to be stuck and 30 children are going to be in trouble because the teacher's attention is distracted, right? He couldn't hear with no hands and no legs that I could tie my shoelaces, that I was going to be independent, right? But what he could hear was, I'm not going to be stuck with her, right? Mom said, well, how about we just try for a week? And if it doesn't work out, no problem. And so she just asked a question and she spoke in a way that got her foot in the door. And it wasn't a lie, it was completely authentic. But it was framed in a way that was his filter of listening. What I like to say is spoke to his listening in that moment. Mm-hmm. And you do this in business, right? No, K-N-O-W. That's all it means. And I'm so lucky that I got that way of hearing things. And it drives people crazy, drives my sister crazy. You know, people say all the time, you know, no does sometimes mean N-O. No, it doesn't. It just means we don't know. I don't know, or you don't know. We just don't know right now. We didn't know a man could walk on the moon. So now we don't know a woman can walk on the moon. We could do it. We could be limitless.
The thing that I love about this story, and the thing that touched my heart and soul more than anything, it was two main things. It was one, what a phenomenal woman of contribution your mother was. She knew exactly the right words to say to elicit the response that would give you that opportunity, because she knew without a shadow of a doubt, you know, once you were in that door, there was nothing to worry about because you were unstoppable and probably had always been from birth. But also the fact that you cared about every single child in that room. And so often as kind of grown-up women and even as children, especially girls, we tend to look at relationships from a point of view of competition rather than one of collaboration. And here you were, you know, your first day, the new girl, regardless of whether you were, you know, a 4-way amputee or not, you were the new girl, and you were leading straight away just by being you, not pretending to be anything else but you, and giving from the heart.
You're so kind to say so. Thank you for looking at it that way. That's lovely.
But the thing is, the thing that makes me laugh is, obviously, once I saw this story and I was just like, wow, this woman and her mom are just blowing me away. I'm gonna reach out. And, you know, you never know whether somebody's going to reply. And you did, and you came back and you were like, yes. I'd love to be a part of your podcast. And then I was like, right, I'm going to do some more research and find out a little bit more about you. And every step of the way, it doesn't matter whether it's a personal goal of yours to climb the Himalayas, or whether it's a business aspiration to work with Uber and, you know, and change things in Canada, whether it's going to sail with an Olympic gold sailor. I mean, you don't give up, you know, regardless of the message that you get. And there was a phenomenal story that I listened to of you going, right, do you know what? I'm going to sail. I'm going to sail in the Paralympics. And they told you what you needed, and you needed to have an Olympic gold medalist kind of supporting your journey. So you chose a particular guy called Magnus. I cannot pronounce his name, so I'm not even going to.
No, Lidjadal. Took me forever.
Lidjadal. And you just packed up your bags in Canada, put whatever you could fit in your car. You know, it was the time. You know, you and I are similar ages. It was the time before we had mobile phones. So you kind of pre-warned him that you were coming. And then on payphones throughout your journey from Canada to Miami, and anybody that hasn't done a trip from Canada to Miami, oh my goodness, you're talking like hours and hours and days of traveling.
Yep, 5 solid days of like 18 hours, right?
Yeah, and every step of the way, you kind of phoned him and said, just to let you know, I'm going to be there and I'm going to be there tomorrow. And when you turned up, eventually he'd answered your calls, but he wasn't there. And
Yeah.
then for the next 3 months, he wasn't really interested. You know,
No.
tell our listeners what happened in those 3 months and what that one pivotal moment was that made him change his mind and go, oh my gosh, not only does this woman know exactly what she's doing on a sailboat, she has the guts and determination to do whatever it takes to get there.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you know that story. So take note, let's unpack what she just did. She is thoroughly researched, and it isn't just about, oh, tell me about you. She's providing everyone deeper stories because she knows her homework, which is phenomenal, right? It's so great. Thank you for knowing my favorite story. And like, I showed up and he didn't answer any of those calls, like none of it, or emails or LinkedIn, none of it. And I show up and he wasn't there. And then I wake up in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, because I'd slept in my car when he wasn't there. I hid my car between two big multi-million-dollar yachts. Kind of like, who you surround yourself with is who you're going to become. I'm like, okay, I'm going to surround myself with million-dollar yachts so that I become a millionaire, right?
Yeah.
So I hide my car between these million-dollar yachts. And then I wake up at 5:30 and like right in front of me, and if I was exactly where I needed to be, you know, you think living out of your car, oh no, but because I was in my car sleeping at 5:30, I woke up with sunrise. And because I woke up with sunrise, there's Magnus right in front of my car washing a boat. And so I jump out and I run over and I'm so excited. And I'm like, Tracy from Toronto, and I want to pursue my Paralympic dream. And I'm super, super, super excited. And he's like really mellow. He's really, really introverted. And he's like a big gold Olympic high performance, deals 99.9% only with male Olympic gold sailors. And he's washing his boat, you know? And I realized, like with my principal, right? My mom didn't say she could tie her shoelaces. I realized I wasn't speaking to his filter, right? As far as he's concerned, one, I'm a female and sailing is male dominated. Two, I have a disability and he's high performance able-bodied world, meaning they have their arms and legs. And three, his filter right now, his listening right now is he needs to get his boat washed, right? And so I picked up a sponge and started washing the boat with him because that's what he's focused on, right? Even though I just spent 5 days driving down, sleeping in my car, gave up everything at home, left all my friends and family behind. And their response, which surprised me, was anger. And I bet you, and now I see this over and over as you get older, is every time you try something new, people love you deeply, but the people closest to you are almost scared for you. And so the way they protect you is to guard the hope. They like to tell you, oh, that's unrealistic, or oh, you can't do that, right? That's all your money, or oh, that's not real. Like, you're a fabulous soul, but really you need to get a 9-to-5 job, right? So people are afraid for you. You're like, well, you're not a big time author. What do you mean you're writing a book, right? People guard you and protect you. And they're your friends and your family, and they're trying to protect, and they do it out of love for you, right? The reason they don't support you is because they love you and they don't want you hurt at failure. And so they're afraid of failure, but you know that you're not going to give up despite the number of times you fail. And so you're not afraid of failure. So you need to watch the way you hear these people that are negative in your life. They're not negative. They're guarding you from fear of failure. It's not you. And so, you know, everybody in my life were like angry at me. If you go, I'm not supporting you. Nobody helped me pack up my car, and I got no arms and no legs. You should have seen me carrying like everything from my like bum shuffling down to my car to put like my kettle in my car. You know, I loaded up all my car and I got it all done, and I took my legs off to drive. I drive with my legs off, and it was like, oh, I forgot my kettle. And with my British mother, I love my kettle. So to bum shuffle up the driveway, get my kettle, and get back down my driveway and get my kettle in the car, because because in the US, they don't drink tea, so they don't do really good tea. So I had to get my kettle, you know? I'm sorry, I'm turning this story really long, but just as
No, not at all.
Everybody was like, I'm not helping you. So even just getting gas, going down there, right? Like bum shuffling to my gas tank. But I never had to fill my gas tank, because if I sat in my car and batted my eyelashes, nobody wants to help you with your gas. But if you get out of your car and you bum shuffle over and you try to do your gas, people see that I had no legs, no hands, and they come and they're like, can I give you a hand? And you know what? I bet you I could have done the gas. But now they were kind enough to ask me, can I give you a hand? So now I need to gift them. I don't want to decline them. Now I have to give them the gift of being able to support me. Because sometimes we're a little bit over independent. That's my thing. I'm too independent. And so I had to be able to let people help me too. And so there's a time for me to do it and a time for, you know, what's the big deal? If they help me fill my gas tank, it saves my energy. I'm driving from sun up to sundown and into the dark. So why don't I let them help me with my gas tank so I save some of my energy so that I can focus on when I am alone? You know, here's the support now. Anyway, so I washed the boats with Magnus, and I ended up for 3 months washing boats with Magnus and running errands for Magnus and waxing boats for Magnus. I don't know if people have seen the movie Karate Kid, you know, waxing on and off the car for 3 months. And then this boat is coming in hot and heavy to the dock, and I'm fixing a boat on the dock. I'm whipping some lines for Magnus. Gives me little odd jobs that he thinks is easy, and he sets me up on the dock. And so glue this part, or fiberglass this, or whip this line. You know, he gives me little odd jobs that are kind of sitting and stationary, and I do the odd job, or I wash the boats because it's a stationary job, right? And then this boat comes in hot and heavy, and all these gold Olympians, they're all shouting, stop, stop. There's the stop again. Some man shouting stop, right? And what is that, right? Like, and if this person knew how to stop, they would stop, right? They're flying in hot and heavy, heading for an immovable dock. They do not want to crash into that dock. So I was more of a teacher, and I'm kind of like, let off your mainsail, the line in the middle, right? Push the boom, push the big sail away from you, back the wind, right? If I shout back the wind, they might not know how to do that. So first it's the instructions, and then it's why. And head to me. And I was sitting where the wind was coming from. So the wind would depower them, right? Instead of going with the wind, they would turn into the wind. And they approached me, and they stopped seamlessly right in front of me. And I took the line and I tied it off at the cleat that was right in front of me. And Magnus saw the whole thing. He clambered on down to the dock, and I've been washing and fixing boats for 3 months for him. Every day, sleeping in my car, hiding between these boats in his boatyard that he didn't know I was sleeping in the car for, right? And he says, Tracy, you can sail. I'm like, yes, I can sail, Magnus, right? I've been trying for 3 months to tell him. And he says, come on, let's go sailing. And so, like you said, tell me about that moment of truth. It is that moment of truth on the dock when he saw me give verbal instructions to somebody. But it wasn't one moment of truth. It is that moment of truth. And that moment of truth was possible because I showed up, right? Because he didn't answer my calls or he didn't answer my emails, that's not going to happen on my couch at home, right? I had to get out there. I had to get off my computer. I had to go down, and I had to be face to face. And it wasn't a one-time relationship, right? It was an accumulation of 3 months of him knowing that I'm tenacious and I'm diligent and that I'm not going anywhere. And it isn't just a one overnight dream wonder. I am seriously committed, and I keep showing up, and I'm going to keep showing up until it happens. And so what also happens is by the time I got on that boat with him that day, I had washed them and fixed them so much for 3 months that my learning curve in his boat was exponential. I had inadvertently spent 3 months really learning those boats. And I think that was Magnus's strategy too, right? He didn't have time as a gold high performance athlete supporting other high performance gold Olympians and high performance men to teach me boat parts, right? So I needed to do that on my own, but he created the opportunity for me to do that on my own. I don't know if he did it consciously or not. I think it was conscious.
I love the fact that you view it that way, because so many people would have got down there and they probably would have given up before they'd had that opportunity, and they would have looked at what he was doing and they would have built their own story around it. And probably the story that they would have built around it was that, he's taking the mickey, he's working me to the bone, he's not doing what, that's our agenda. You wanted him to teach you. That wasn't his agenda. So, the idea that actually you just kept going with that surefire knowledge that at some point this would become a reality. And I think so many women, don't show up for whatever reason, whether it's fear of success, whether it's fear of failure, whether it's fear of being visible, whether it's
wrong.
Exactly. We don't show up, and we're afraid to put our hand above the parapet. But when we do, our expectation of how easy things should be sometimes. And, it would be lovely for everybody to come knock on my door and say, yeah, I'd love to come and do a podcast with you. But actually, reality is you have to go out and if you'd said no, I would go, great. Okay. But anyway, and I would carry on building that, that relationship and conversation. And that's what we need to do. But so many of us just give up at the first or even the second hurdle.
Yes, I am really, really lucky. I am so blessed because I was born a 4-way amputee, right? Because I was missing my arms and my legs every single day, people look at me, they're inspired. I don't even have to drink a cup of tea. I just have to sit here and they see my arms and legs and, oh, you're so inspiring, right? I can be in Tim Hortons, which is a Canadian coffee shop, and they're the only coffee shop in Canada that do steeped tea, right? So that's why I go to Tim Hortons for my steeped tea, right? They brew a pot of tea. They don't just put a tea bag in some warm water. And so I go to Tim Hortons and I'm holding my tea and people say, oh, you're so inspiring, right? And they don't know that I left my legs in Kathmandu and climbed the Himalayas with no legs, right? They don't know that I'm a World Cup sailor where I sail against 27 able-bodied men who are gold Olympians, and that I'm one of 3 women and the only one in the race with no arms and no legs, right? Like they don't know that I busted Uber into Canada in very corporate hostile meetings, right? They don't know these things. And they think I'm inspiring because I'm holding it. So the reason that I'm blessed in this conversation where you talk about where they don't show up or don't feel like, they might be underestimated when they get there, or, well, do I have what it takes at the moment? They're going to laugh at me that my contribution, I don't have a valuable contribution. I haven't earned the right to speak up yet. These kinds of things in our head, or approach them, or my business is too small to even think about approaching them for sponsorship. The stories we put in our head. Or the teenager's just gonna fight back at me. She's not gonna listen anyway. So why am I gonna put the effort out to talk to them about that outfit that I'd love that they would wear something different? Trying to diversify the examples here for everyday to business. But I'm lucky because I was born a 4-way amputee. Every day, people look at me like with that sympathy, and they look at me like. Well, of course she can't do that. I think she's fabulous, but of course she can't go to this school. Of course she can't hold a cup of tea. Of course she can't be a director of our program that will end up outperforming the stock market because we put her in that position, right? What world experience, what lived experience would she have as a 4-way amputee that's probably in a long-term institution with people helping her get dressed every day. Like, how could she have business experience, right? And in fact, I don't have a personal support worker. I'm very lucky that I can dress myself and feed myself, but I'm a lot bigger than feeding myself, right? I can also turn no's and O's into KNOWs and create businesses that are outperforming the stock market. And so I'm lucky that I was born limitless, because I learned from a very young age, right from a baby with a spoon, that babies they just want to eat that dessert, or they just want to play with those kids on the lawn next door. So I wasn't being a hero. I was just being a child that I had to do whatever it took to get to that cookie jar. And my sister had her arms and her legs, but my mom said that I was the one that ended up climbing on the flour bag with my wet diaper to knock off the cookie jar so that I could get the cookie off the counter, and that there was flour and wet diaper all over her kitchen because of me breaking into a cookie jar, right? And so I was lucky to be born without my arms and legs, because I learned just this automatic way of being. I had to do whatever it took to get the cookie or to play with the kids next door meant physically rolling down a lawn, and there was a skateboard. I like to say I borrowed. I didn't. The skateboard at the bottom of the lawn, and I used the one long arm appendage of sorts. It's not typical bone structure, but I used my longer arm appendage to skateboard over and body roll up the lawn, because that's where they were playing. They were playing on that lawn, and the bully over there was kind of being funny. I think he chose the lawn that was only one gravel driveway away from me, because he knew, how is she going to get across that gravel driveway, right? But I rolled up the lawn and I'm like, hi, can I play? Right? I could have been sad on my lawn, or I could find out, how do I get over there, right? And I eventually toughened up my stump knees so that I could walk across, like stump on my knees. And if I had to walk across a gravel driveway just quickly to be able to play, well, it was short-term pain for big time gain, right? And so, and then the skin eventually got calloused, right? And so gravel driveways weren't so bad. So you do whatever it takes to play with the other kids. And so I'm lucky in business. I'm naive enough to show up in front of gold Olympic Magnus Ligidol, because everybody always says no. And I'm like, oh, they always say no. I just have to hang in there till they see two things. One, I'm not going anywhere. And two, I'm way more capable than they realize. They just have to get to know me, right? And so this is what you do. This is, and so same with Uber, breaking Uber into Canada and showing up at City Hall. And I'm like, they're like, no, it's no, it's no, it's no, it's no. Well, they just don't know. Like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, let's get down there. And going down to the City Hall and standing in front of like all these angry taxi drivers that are spitting and swearing and being really inappropriate. And the City Hall, they all wear their wigs and they got their gavels and they administrate the room, right? And he's like banging his gavel over and over. He's like, this is, a professional place. You don't behave like this. And there's certainly no need for comments like that. Everybody gets their say. You'll get your turn. Tracy gets her turn, right? Like it was crazy. And I wasn't trying to throw taxi drivers under the bus. I'm just saying, we don't have on demand, we don't have enough transportation for people with disabilities. And so with Uber comes wheelchair accessible vehicles. With Uber comes Uber Assist. With Uber comes affordable transportation for everyone, and not just people with disabilities, but everyone. And so there's enough business for taxi drivers and hailing and keeping that business. There's no threat to the taxi drivers, which there was, but there was no threat to their accessible vehicle transportation, and they'd been given 20 years and 10 years and 5 years and 1 year. They were given lots and lots of mandates that if you're going to run this business, you must have fair and equitable service for everyone in terms of accessible vehicles. But they wouldn't buy accessible vehicles. They wouldn't get the accessible vehicles because they feel like they had this idea that able-bodied customers don't want accessible taxis. And I think in today's day and age, people don't care whether they're getting into a cab that works for them or also works for other people, right? It's great for suitcases. It's great for when you break a leg. It's great for baby prams. It's great for when you have a lot of groceries. It's great for when you go to the airport and you have your suitcases, right? It's just useful. Space is useful. And so having an accessible vehicle isn't really, it's accessible. It's able to access for everyone. It isn't about a wheelchair, and it isn't about you looking like, oh, I'm sitting in this car now, and all of a sudden you look like you must use a wheelchair, right? You don't have that perception. But culturally, in a country where they don't have technology or they don't have the legislation and they don't have the awareness, because people with disabilities still are being put up for adoption, are still being executed at birth, are still being secretly hidden behind curtains in families' homes, because not because they're bad people, but because they don't have the artificial legs that I have, and they don't have the legislation that mandates we must have an accessible workforce or an accessible entry into our shopping mall, right? So they don't have the infrastructure and the legislation and the technology and the awareness. So they're not bad people, they're just in a different space-time continuum of understanding. But then when they come to Canada, where there isn't a story, it isn't an obstacle, but their mindset is it's an obstacle. And so then they don't get the accessible vehicle. And so then we don't have accessible transportation is massive, right? For me to work, say I'm a teacher, and when I started teaching, I didn't have a vehicle, because you need a job to afford a vehicle. And because I need an accessible vehicle, they won't adapt a used vehicle. So most people without a job, they buy a cheap vehicle, right? You might buy $1,000 vehicle or £1,000 cheaper vehicle, right? But because of adaptions, they wanted me to buy a really new vehicle, which I couldn't afford. So as a teacher, I need on-demand rides to get, they call you in the morning at 6 a.m. and say, can you work at this school? Well, I had no way of getting transportation to the school. So it was really hard to be a substitute teacher without transportation. And I needed the job to afford a transportation, right? It was like you're caught in this loophole as a person with a disability. So transportation is one of those inhibitors to equitable employment. And it's not about the disability, it's about the infrastructure. And so with Uber would come fair and equitable solutions. And so the taxi drivers didn't want the accessible vehicles. So it's like, you do your business and let Uber do the accessible vehicles and the Uber Assist. But they still were spitting on me, and there were still threats. And there were mayors that were like pushing me against the wall saying, do you want that funding for that organization? Like, there were threats of all sorts to people. Like, that organization had nothing to do with Uber, but they knew that I was an ambassador. I was an advocate for that organization, for that facility, who had extra programming for children with disabilities. And they knew I was a supporter. So they made like, oh, we're going to affect their funding if you support Uber. So clearly somebody must be in their back pocket for their votes, right, with Uber. But, I go in there and like, no just means they don't know, right? The taxi driver wouldn't be blocking it if they just knew there's a benefit for them. And so some of us as a child, somebody teases us because we wear glasses or we have braces or we have freckles. I had glasses, I had braces, I had freckles, I had red hair, carrot top hair, and no arms and no legs, right? Like I had it all. My beautiful sister, she olive skin. She was a model for bathing suits by the time she was 19 in Bali, Indonesia. Like this is like, come on. We'd go to the dentist, I'd brush my teeth, she'd black off, and I'd be the one with cavities. I'm like, what is this? But it was perfect because it taught me a really great resilience and tenacity. And I show up like, oh, I got value. You just don't know it yet, right? Because of 5 years old, because of being a 4-way amputee. So I'm so lucky to be born without my arms and without my legs, because I bring into every conversation, my thinking isn't, I was lucky to be limitless. I spell limitless with a B, L-I-M-B, limitless. I am limitless. And so all of you can be limitless too. And the only thing stopping you from being and living your ultimate dream, like the only thing stopping you from being a millionaire is you, right? It's here. And so we just need to believe it, even though we're afraid. Like I was afraid to talk to Magnus. I was afraid to go into that kindergarten room. I was afraid in front of those taxi drivers, right? I was afraid. I didn't do it without fear. You do it in spite of fear. You exceed uncertainty. You feel uncertain, like, oh, do they want my funding? Do I don't have an MBA and everybody in this room is super educated. Everyone in this room is a man. Everyone in this room is wearing $1,000 suit, male or female, like whatever it is, right? And so you go in there believing that they have no idea that your suit doesn't cost $1,000, right? You walk and talk and stand like you are wearing $1,000 suit. You do your very best to look like you're wearing $1,000 suit, and you talk with your value that you've learned from whatever transferable skills, right? I learned my transferable skills for breaking Uber into Canada at 5 years old, right? That was not my master's in business. That came many, 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 many years later.
The thing that I absolutely love about what you're saying is that lots of people make excuses as to why life hasn't turned out the way that we hoped. And the thing that I love about you, Tracy, is that there is no excuse. It's just like, you know, if that way didn't work, let's try another way. And I know you've got a phenomenal book called Unstoppable You. And obviously it has a vast array of wonderful stories in it. But it's also quite practical about, you know, getting people to step out of their own way and to start to think differently and to kind of expand on that. Can you just kind of explain a little bit about that? Because I know you've got something quite exciting coming alongside the book too.
Yes. Oh, thank you for asking. So for example, chapter 2 is the kindergarten story. And I think it's chapter 8 that's the Magnus Lidgedal story about, you know, sailing and breaking through. But, you know, at my first evolution of the book in February 2017, before it was launched, and I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about a book, and it was Unstoppable Tracy. And then I got this light bulb in November of 2017, and the book was at the publishers. Like it was already about to be edited and like it was edited, and it was like going into the printing stage. And they said, we're printing today, right? And they told me, and I was at a conference in a hotel, and then I got this light bulb sitting in the room. Somebody was talking about like, what works for you? What doesn't work for you on the stage at 8 a.m. And I got this light bulb. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I left the room very quietly on the break. And I was looking for somewhere private, and everybody's like, Unstoppable Tracy, Unstoppable Tracy. And they all want to do pictures with me. I'm so lucky. So then there was this door, and I opened the door to see if, and it was a broom closet. So I opened the broom closet, and I shut the door, and I'm hiding in a broom closet in this conference hotel, November 1st. And I'm calling my Black Card Books publisher people, and I'm like, stop the presses. And they're like, what? It's already there. And I'm like, no, you got to stop the presses. I had this fabulous idea. It's not about Unstoppable Tracy. It's about Unstoppable You, right? That's why I share these stories. It's not because I want you to say, oh, isn't that a cute story about kindergarten? I want you to be unstoppable. And that's what my stories, the purpose is so you are limitless, that you get the limitless secret. And I realized the better way to do that is to put in coaching questions. And they're like, well, if you're going to do it, you got to do it right here, right now. So right there, right on the spot, I'm like, okay, chapter 1 questions. And so in a closet, in 10 minutes, I had to share coaching questions for 10 chapters. And at the end of every chapter, I reflect for you. So for example, in the kindergarten story, I ask you at the end, so what's something that didn't work for you? What way of being? What conversation? And what's a time that really worked for you, that you were excited without being humble? A time that you thrived. And now the third question was, so you know what didn't work and you know what did work. What's going on in your life right now? Knowing this, what works and what doesn't, what are you going to do right now for this current obstacle, this current situation? And so every chapter has some coaching questions to help you turn the story, turn Magnus's washing boat story to work for you, and turn my kindergarten story to work for you. And so what happened in 2017 and 2018 is everybody's like, can I have your CD series? Can I have some coaching with you? But in 2018, I was in 20 countries, right? 20 countries. And like I was in 11 countries in Europe, including your England, your home England. And I'm coming to Italy in April this year, and I'm coming to England, Ireland, Wales, Scotland in May. Right, I'm constantly traveling. So I do coach, but it's very expensive coaching because my time is so tiny, because most of my time is on big stages with like Jane Fonda and John Travolta and Dr. Phil. A couple months ago, I had no idea that my magical life would blow up. I'm so humbled that my dreams came true. I can't believe myself that these are the stages that and events that I share with people. You know, I can't believe it. And so you got to believe it. I was dumb to not believe it. I got to believe it. And so you believe it. And so I'm in the closet and I do these questions. And now all of you have been like, you want some Tracy time. And I do have some time, but it's very, very tight and precious. So it's only really high performance clients that I can do coaching for. So what can I do for everybody to give more wonderful magic like you do? And so I'm turning it into a CD coaching series. So the book is, you can get the book for free, unstoppableyoubook.ca. Everyone can have the book for free as a download. Like I'll email you the free book and you get those coaching questions for free. Go to the book, no problem. And I don't do fabulous online marketing. I send you the book. I don't send you a lot of junk mail. I send you the book, and when I get a video out, I might send you a video to help remind you that you can do it for like 3 minutes. But that's the essential purpose of my email shares, just to keep you motivated so you are unstoppable. And so I have this CD series that's with the book. And so, for example, what works for you, what doesn't, what's ahead, that is actually rooted in something called appreciative inquiry. So appreciate, grateful for, thankful for. It's a theory, right? It's a leadership development, personal growth approach. And inquiry, appreciate, grateful for, positive for, inquiry, investigate, ask questions, gather data, gather information. And so like water, hydrogen, and oxygen, when you put them together, hydrogen and oxygen, you get the magic of water that hydrates our souls and keeps us alive. We need to be hydrated. We need to keep our cells hydrated. Well, appreciative inquiry, positive questioning together is like water. It is a magic invitation into magnificence. And so I'm not saying ignore the problem, right? But instead of saying, what's the problem? What you focus on grows. You say, what worked last time I had a problem? What worked last time I had a similar problem? And so instead of finding what you focus on grows, what was the problem? You find the problem. What was the solution last time I had a problem? You end up finding a solution, right? Einstein at 14 years old said, what would it be like to ride a beam of light? That was Einstein's 14-year-old brain, right? What he focused on, the questions he asked, is who he became. And so all of my coaching questions, the reason I could pull them out of my head in 10, 20 minutes in a closet in a hotel on November 1st, 2017, before the book went to press, was because I borrowed I borrowed from the leadership theories I know. So I brought a leadership theory to each of the 10 chapters. And so the CD series just gives you a little bit more coaching and development around, for example, chapter 2 with the kindergarten story, appreciative inquiry, and how you can apply that strength-based leadership. What are your strengths? And how can you use those core strengths to impact your style of leadership going forward. So you feel confident and ready to be at that table, to be generating that conversation into possibilities more confidently, and realize and understand you are confident. You don't have to fool yourself into thinking, I deserve to be here, I deserve to be here, I deserve to be here. That doesn't sound like you deserve to be here. I deserve to be here, right? That sounds like I deserve to be here and that I believe it, right? So strength-based leadership, appreciative inquiry, is really great at increasing your confidence and realizing you do deserve to be at that table. And so that's, for example, what a chapter 2 on the CD might look like. I take you through some exercises and the conversation a little bit deeper from that chapter. And coming out.
I love it. I love the fact that, in like 5-10 minutes, it's like, I haven't got the excuse to say, I haven't got time. It needs to be done now. Boom, 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 boom. And you just did it. And I think the wonderful thing about talking to you throughout, and, I could talk to you for another 2-3 hours. But the thing that I absolutely love is this message to every single woman out there that actually we need to shed those excuses. It doesn't actually matter who you are and how you're showing up in the world, as long as you show up. It doesn't matter whether you're a mom or a CEO or an entrepreneur or somebody just starting out in business. Just understand the full power, the unstoppable you that resides in each and every single one of us, and step forward as the phenomenal women of contribution that we are. So thank you so much, Tracy, for taking time out today to share just a small snippet of your journey with our listeners and watchers. And I'm just feeling so incredibly blessed that you said yes. So thank you.
And thank you for having a mission to affect over 1 billion lives. We are better together. Together, we are going to affect 1 billion lives. And I am so honored to be on your journey, to be with you today, all of you listeners, and you making this massive difference. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast.
Wonderful. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.